Good evening and welcome to the 2020 Candidates Forum. I'm Denise Domke, the President and CEO of the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is pleased to be able to continue to offer opportunity for committed local residents, each of them willing to serve our community in elected office, the chance to respectfully explain their positions on issues important to both residents and the business community. Tonight's moderator is our 2020 Board Chair, Chelsea Minor. Chelsea serves as Corporate Director of Public Affairs for Raley's, a legacy business here in West Sacramento with several large operations here. Chelsea also serves as the company's spokesperson and handles external affairs and government relations. She's no stranger to political issues impacting our region and our state. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your engagement in this community tradition.
Good evening. I want to welcome all of our Facebook viewers that are joining us live, and thank you for joining us this evening in a very non-traditional forum. But tonight is a very, very important forum, and it's featuring our candidates for the City of West Sacramento City Council. I'm excited to serve as the moderator for tonight's forum. Before I get started, I do want to recognize one individual who is not present this evening. One current City Council member is retiring after serving the City of West Sacramento in different capacities since 2005. We want to take a moment and thank Mayor Pro Tem Babs Sandeen for her incredible service and contribution to our city. I, for one, will miss working with you, and I just want to take a moment and acknowledge all of your contributions to the city. With her retirement, it offers up new opportunities for new leaders. So tonight, we'll be talking to the candidates for the City of West Sacramento City Council, and it will be for 2 at-large seats. You'll have the privilege to hear from 5 different candidates this evening. I want to take a moment and welcome those candidates. The candidates' order on stage was randomly selected by random draw previous to tonight's forum. Starting with the candidates on my left, Jason Scrimshire. Next to Jason is Dante Early. Next up, Norma Acala. Next up, Dwayne Wilson. Hello. And lastly, Karina Orozco. Thank you all for being here this evening. Let's start by going over the rules for tonight's forum. Let me remind you, this is a forum and not a debate. We intend to ask thoughtful questions and receive thoughtful responses. I ask that you please direct your your answers to the audience online and not to your fellow candidates. Please resist interrupting each other or making sounds while any of the other candidates are speaking. I will rotate the order in which I ask the questions so that everyone has a chance to answer first. I will indicate to you how much time is allowed per question, and we will have a timekeeper here that will help you by providing a 30-second, a 15-second, and a stop sign letting you know that your time has omitted. And if necessary, I will politely interrupt you if you've exceeded your time. During one of the sections we call the lightning round, you will be asked to respond by just a show of hands to indicate your support on particular issues impacting the business community. In addition, though, to help our voters watching this forum, we ask that you help them draw contrasts between each of you. Given that there are 5 of you and only 2 seats, we want to make sure that you're offering clear solutions and not repeating what has already been said. I want people to be able to walk away and really have a better understanding of who you are and what your platform is. Now, those are the ground rules. Let's get started. We're going to begin with our opening statements from each candidate. You will have 1.5 minutes to introduce yourself to our online audience, give some background about yourself, and explain why you're running for City Council. I'm going to begin with candidate number 1, candidate Scrimshire.
Hello, my name is Jason Scrimshire. I'm running for West Sacramento City Council. I grew up here in West Sac. I currently am raising 2 beautiful boys with my wife here in West Sac as well. Politically, I stand slightly right of center. I believe strongly that we need to be fiscally conservative while never overlooking the ROI of the social services that we do have here in the city. I've had the privilege of watching this city grow and improve over the years since my childhood. I've been blessed to live here, to work here, and to worship here. And now I'm ready to serve. Thank you.
Great. Candidate Early.
Hi, my name is Dr. Dante Early, and I am honored to be here today. One of the questions I get asked actually quite frequently is, why are you running? My short answer is because I think I can help. My slightly longer answer is that growing up, seeing both of my parents dedicate their lives to the military ingrained in me a core value of service to others. I had my son my sophomore year of college when I was 19, and for me, that's really when my life changed purposes, and I had a new purpose for being a mother. But also, it's where I really discovered what it truly means to have service to someone, again, other than yourself. It's also when I discovered a new passion, which was data and research, as a McNair Scholar at UC Davis. For me, data is so much more than numbers. It represents communities that I come from. It represents those who are underserved and unserved. I got my PhD in human development with a minor in quantitative psychology, and although I'm not the kind of doctor that serves you in a clinic or at an emergency room, I am the type of doctor that serves our communities throughout California and helping us deal with and plan for public health issues.
Great. Thank you. Next, we will move to candidate Akala.
Thank you, Chelsea, and to the Chamber for this opportunity. I'm Norma. I grew up in West Sac, and I know so many families here. They are my friends and my neighbors. I've served on the Washington Unified School Board for 6 years. I've served as president, vice president for the Yellow School Board Association. I've served on the curriculum committee, and I have also served on the 2x2, which is a collaboration between the city and the Washington Unified School District. Before being elected, our schools in the north got all the old books, and they also had a different curriculum. That's because 36 years, all the board members lived within a stone's throw of each other. Happens also on our city council. No one does this purposely. I'm the only candidate who supports neighborhood elections. You are the only city residents here in Yolo County, West Sacramento, without neighborhood elections. Businesses can't compete here in West Sacramento because we pay twice what Sacramento residents do in utilities. We need SMUD now. Internet? Absolutely. We should have free internet because that's the only way that our businesses and our students can receive the best education that they can possibly have. Cities such as New York, Barcelona, and Paris all have free internet. Finally, after every school board meeting, I meet with parents and grandparents who voice their concerns and recommendations. I promise to do the same if elected to school board. I'm Norma Alcala, and I'm asking for your vote.
Great. Thank you, candidate Akala. Next, we will move to candidate Wilson.
Hi, my name is Dwayne Wilson. I've been a resident of West Sacramento for the last 18 years. Been an entrepreneur and a small business owner for the last 30 years. I raised a 10-year-old daughter here in the city, and for the last 4 years or so, I have been working on community groups such as West Sac Play, raising money for schools and playgrounds in the city, and helping other small businesses with technology issues. I would like to see our city grow and become its better self, and there are ways that business can help do that. I think we're at a point where we need strong leadership, people who have managed large P&Ls, large budgets, large operations, to grow and scale those things, to be the next best version of ourselves. So I think that in general, there are some issues that need to be addressed, especially with the coming crisis, financial, health, COVID. Jobs, apprenticeships, infrastructure, and education are things that we should all work on as a community to make sure that we are leading where we can. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your vote.
Thank you, candidate Wilson. And lastly, candidate Orozco.
Thank you, Chelsea. I shouldn't be on this stage here tonight. I was born to a single 16-year-old teenage mother who worked 2 minimum wage part-time jobs in order to make ends meet. But ladies and gentlemen, they didn't always meet. And food and housing insecurity were alive and well in our family. And as a young child, I knew firsthand the impacts of family violence and drugs and what havoc they could wreak on a community. If it weren't for someone who believed that I was deserving of an opportunity, I wouldn't be here tonight. But I am. I am here to blaze a path for every West Sacramentan because somebody did that for me. I am here because I believed that every homeless person in our community was deserving of housing and a job. I am here because as a council member with 4 young children,
I believe that every family in our community should have a safe place for their children to play and learn in our city. I'm here because as a person who never thought she was going to college, I want every high school graduate to be automatically admitted to community college and get free college tuition. I'm here because as a sexual assault and child abuse prosecutor who has seen the worst in our society, I know that we need to protect our most valuable resource, our children. And I want every child to start the school year with the school supplies they need to succeed. I am here because I've done all of that and more, and I'm only getting started. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm on this stage to ask for your support to do another 4 years and get the job done.
Great, thank you. We've got a passionate group of people here. I'm excited to jump into our questions. As I noted earlier, a majority of these questions you'll have a minute to answer, but I'll indicate for you if there's additional time necessary to answer the question in totality. Let's kick off by talking about the hottest topic on all of our minds, the COVID-19 pandemic. We know firsthand as the business chamber and community that businesses have been forced to modify their operations, which has created many periodical closings, challenges with social distancing, and spending money, of course, on things like PPE. We want to ensure that our businesses do not close for good. In your role as city council member, how can the city protect the health and safety of the community while also helping our businesses open up and restore many of the lost jobs? We are going to start with you, candidate Early.
So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So many of our small businesses are, again, our family members and our neighbors. And so when we think about what it is to come out of COVID and to navigate through COVID, it's so important that we are not just coming out, but we are coming out together and ensuring that we've supported all of our businesses and local businesses. I think as a city council member and a city council leader, what we can do is think of creative and innovative ways to partner with our business community. It also means that as we draw down federal funds like the CARES funds, we are ensuring that the most needy businesses who are struggling are the ones that are first in line for those services. We could also be innovative about our land use and our street access and ensuring that small businesses could access that, cordon that off so that, again, they're able to continue to operate even again as we are dealing with COVID.
Great, thank you. We will move on to candidate Akala. Great.
I think we can be very creative here in West Sacramento. I know we already have rent moratoriums in place, and we are looking at making grants available for many of our business owners. I've been a small business owner, so I know how difficult that can be. One of the first things you do is you try and take care of your employees. When I mentioned about SMUD, that's one of the things we need to change, because every resident here is paying about $1,000 more than they need to. In Sacramento, one of the things that they have also done is a shifting of funds. We have Measure N funds available, and I'm saying temporarily during the COVID period that we need to move some of those funds over to help our small businesses. We need to buy local, and one of the most important things is outreach. We have to do outreach with our private businesses and our public entities, and this will help with our huge network that we have here in West Sacramento. It will definitely help all our West Sacramento small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Time is up. Appreciate that thoughtful response as we think about moving through. I'm going to move on to you, candidate Wilson.
Thank you. So I think it's very important that our city respect science, and even though it may cause our businesses to have a little more strife, we need to get this pandemic under control and end it so that everybody can get back to the lives that we all want. So there are things that we can do as a city to mitigate the exposure to people who have lost their jobs, who are maybe facing homelessness, etc. And we need more public-private partnerships with business to do job retraining, reskilling, and find new industries that we can bring to the city where the people who are unemployed from other positions can now move into something else. And so, thank you very much.
Appreciate that. I think there's a lot to be said around the reskilling. It's an incredibly important topic. And lastly, we'll move to you. Oh, sorry, not
Almost
lastly. Next, we will move to candidate Orozco.
Thank you. Our small businesses are suffering, and these are the people that have invested their life savings and put it on the line in order to invest in our community. So when COVID hit and I saw that our businesses were looking for help, I worked with the West Sac Chamber of Commerce on the Support Dreams effort and made several videos trying to encourage our community to patronize local businesses. And I did so as myself. My family never ate so much West Sacramento local restaurant food. In addition, on the council, I currently sit on the council, and we passed just this week a small business assistant grant program and also a commercial eviction moratorium. It's important to continue to work with the Chamber as we move forward to assist our local businesses because they are the lifeblood of our local economy, and also make sure that they're aware of all the grants and resources that are available to them and for us to continue to fight on the federal and state level for more.
Great. Thank you. We appreciate your support on Support Dreams specifically. We will move on to you, candidate Scrimshire.
Hi. The COVID pandemic has challenged each and every one of us in ways that we never saw coming. While we have to be as creative as possible to get our businesses up and running, we also need to be aggressive. We need to work with the county, and we need to push the limits to get our businesses open as fully functioning as they can, as quickly as is safe.
Great. Thank you. So, current situation is one piece of this, but as a chamber, of course, we're thinking about what the future looks like, and specifically, what does the post-pandemic economy look like? And while, we're realistic that we're going through this now, and we want to make sure that we're being sensitive to things that you've all talked about around safety and science, we want to know specifically from the council members, what is your plan as you think about rebuilding the economy, and how will you support those businesses as we come out of this pandemic? We're going to start with you, candidate Alcala.
Thank you. Actually, the city of Sacramento, they're going to be having about a $90 million deficit. And one of the things they're doing is not filling current positions that they have open. So that's going to help. I believe, as I mentioned, that we have Measure N money. It was supposed to go for public safety, and it was supposed to go for community development. I'm saying we shift some of that money over. That would actually, I believe, give us about, we got 900,000 last year, 3.2 million this year. So we should shift some of those funds over for some of the things that I had recommended earlier. And I believe also if we have a 16% reserve and we should bring that down to a 10% reserve, that would give us an additional 12 million so that we can help our businesses here in West Sacramento.
Great. Thank you very much for that answer. Mm-hmm. Next, we will move on to candidate Wilson.
So beyond council fighting for state and federal grant dollars and using monies that it currently has to buoy up our local economy, I think there are some things where our region could excel in business. And so that would be in food and agriculture, agricultural technology, clean technology, biomedicine, and we can build off of the successes from the apprenticeship programs and scholarship programs and make new public-private partnerships with the residents in the city to reskill and retrain people into the jobs of the future. And then everything is an opportunity if you look at it in that regard. So we have plenty of time to fund the next generation and to keep ourselves safe and happy.
Great. Appreciate you tying those things together as well. We'll move on to you, candidate Orozco.
Thank you. West Sacramento has always been ripe for innovation. And we have a saying here in West Sac, if someone has a great idea, just get out of their way. It is our job as a city to get out of their way so they can invest in our community and create small businesses. In our case, we have the opportunity to retrain our workforce in order to meet the jobs that we have in our community. Currently, we have about 25,000 jobs, but about less people to fill them. So I support our West Sac Home Run, which allows children ages kindergarten to get a college savings account, but also moving through getting high-skilled internships, college savings accounts, free tuition, and automatic admittance to community college. If we can train a local workforce, that will assist in our local businesses and our economic boom. But I'm also looking forward to working with our chamber to find the adequate answers as we move forward together.
Great. Appreciate that very much. Same question around the post-pandemic. Over to you, candidate Scrimshire.
Leaving this pandemic, it's going to be difficult. We're going to have some very trying times ahead of us. And while we will have to be creative, we are going to have to move money around. The most important thing we can do is vehemently oppose adding hardships to our local businesses or to our residents. This is going to have to be where we stand. We're going to have to focus on our core services, and we are going to have to reduce spending. But we have to make sure that we're not adding additional taxes to our businesses or our residents as they try to pull themselves up out of this impending recession. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, candidate Scrimshire. And lastly, candidate Early.
So one of the things that I think is so amazing about West Sac is that within the region, we actually are one of the highest job generating cities in the region. With that being said, we actually have some of the highest unemployment as well. And so what that means is we are generating jobs that our residents don't qualify for. They can't meet those minimum qualifications. And so when I think about reimagining what the future might look like, I also think about our home run program in which we have invested in giving the skills necessary. But I also think about those in which who have lost jobs, who potentially would like to change careers into a career of the future, and allowing for us to leverage what we have begun to see for home run, but for not just our youth, which is also important, but also dealing with the now and those who are losing their jobs and unemployment. And so that's apprenticeship programs, that's also career pathways. Again, as City Council, it is our job to be the conduit between these programs and our community.
Thank you very much. So, staying on the theme of COVID, but also thinking about city budgets, we'll move into our next question. The economic impact of the pandemic is likely to impact the finances of our local government in the short term, but also the long term. If elected, that you may also find that you have to make a choice between raising taxes and cutting public service. I ask that you share your spending priorities and be specific with that if you can. You will have a minute and a half for this question. And tell us which public services are most important to you, and would you raise taxes to protect those specific services? Again, you'll have a minute and a half, and we will start with you, candidate Wilson.
Hi, I think the answer to raising taxes is maybe. It has to be on the table at any given discussion in any town or city in America right now. It's impossible to grow our businesses and economy, provide for our students and our families, and not have the revenue to do the basic services. At the same time, the first thing anybody ever wants to cut are arts and science and STEM and music. And they're the things that make us have a culture as opposed to just secondary programs that exist. And so I would avoid cutting all of those things which bring us a sense of community and self, and focus on restricting the budgets and restricting expenses, and looking at ways that we can do public-private partnerships, for instance, to build new businesses here in the city that expand on the things that we've already done fairly well at. For instance, the culinary program. It would be a really great boom to the entire region if we moved that program and built a food commissary that allowed food entrepreneurs to set up and sell their wares and give the people who have restaurants in other areas the ability to test out our market and let us prove to them that we're worthy of having restaurants in this space. Because I think that's one thing that people really miss. That's what I miss, restaurants. So thank you.
Yes, I think we all agree we miss our restaurants and service for that matter, and that there's definitely an opportunity here in the future. We'll move to you, candidate Orozco.
Thank you. I'm smiling because our city council, the council that I'm a part of, we've already made strategic decisions to ensure that we have the resources to properly position ourselves for an event like this. This work started well before I started on the council. But as a part of the council for the last 4 years, we've made some hard decisions, envisioning that perhaps a recession would be in tow. That said, some of the investments that we've already made are to Measure G, which would be a pot of money that we would use for redevelopment. In addition, Measure E, which would tackle some of the issues, the impacts and incidences of homelessness, issues such as smart city investments, roads, and other obligations for our city. In addition, I helped co-author Measure N, anticipating that the unfunded liabilities obligation would be so tremendous that perhaps we would have to be making cuts to core services, including public safety. As such, I marched on the streets trying to tell our community, let's vote for Measure N, which was a 1/4-cent sales tax increase in order to cushion ourselves against a situation where we would have to make cuts. And unfortunately, because of those investments and because of that forward thinking, we are well positioned, and I think that we're in a way better situation than many other cities in the state of California.
Great, thank you. For our viewing audience, the question to the candidates is specific around specific public services that they support as it relates to spending priorities, and if so, to keep those services, would you raise taxes? We'll go back over to you, candidate Scrimshire.
Thank you. In my opinion, the core services of our city and what's most important to me, our fire, our police, our social services that lift up our neighbors, and our youth. These are where we have to focus. We are going to be in difficult times. We are going to have to make cuts. Those are the things I don't want to cut, and I will tell you right now that at this time, I cannot support taxing our residents more as we come out of such a difficult financial time for all of them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Same question over to you around services, spending priorities, and taxes. Over to candidate Early.
So the idea of raising taxes, as so many of us, me included, are dealing with less income, higher bills, and more need than ever, seems like a lot to ask of our community. And so for me, I would hesitate to raise taxes for a community that is already struggling to pay our bills and just to get by. We, as Councilmember Orozco already noted, have positioned ourselves as a city, thanks to our leadership, in a way that we have reserves, and we also were forward thinking with Measure N, in which we could pull down funds, again, to ensure that services, again, can continue to be offered. Public safety is hugely important, as well as social services. For me, as a mental health professional and a mental health leader, I would want to ensure that we are leveraging funds both from feds as well as state to ensure that services like homelessness services and mental health services continue to be offered in our community. Now more than ever, it's important that we are investing in our community and also helping small businesses as they struggle as well.
Thank you, appreciate that. And lastly, we'll finish off with you, candidate Acola.
Thank you. There are a lot of great ideas, and I think one of the most important things that we can do is to get citizen input and invite our labor partners in as well to find out exactly where we should be making these cuts. Now, I personally believe that our senior programs and our social services, as well as our police and fire, are very necessary services. We need those. Am I inclined to raise taxes? It's not completely off the table, and that's the reason I believe it's so important to get citizen input on this. We need to really open up our books over at City Hall and explore where we can make these cuts. One of the things I mentioned was the reserves that we have. I think if we go from 16% to 10%, I mentioned we would have $12 million additional dollars. And I believe the $38 million that had been reserved for the trolley car, it's just not going to happen. So I say we use that money into our budget, and that would definitely be very helpful. I mean, we just don't have the $100 million in federal money. So I just feel also, I share the concerns that many of our folks are out of work now. Taxes would be a very difficult thing to do, but I think we need to be innovative. And I've mentioned some things that I think our city council could do in order to not raise the taxes and work with our community on solutions. Thank you.
Great, appreciate that. Let's move and shift topics a little bit to affordable housing. As this has been a very, very important topic for the last several years across our state, and I would argue that it's only been exacerbated through COVID-19. We're seeing some really exciting numbers of the population growth and those that are interested here in the greater Sacramento region, but of course that's created some supply shortages for those in the region. So as you think about your role on the council, I have 2 questions for you. So you'll have a minute and a half for this. How do you define affordable housing? So what lens are you looking through as a city council member? And given the need for this new supply, how would you support new housing developments to speed up the process to reach that increased demand? And we will start with you, candidate Orozco.
Thank you. Well, as I explained in my opening statement, affordable housing was an issue that I navigated through my childhood. And I won't lie, we were evicted. We experienced housing in the worst areas as a mom and young child only because of what we could afford. I am excited. I'm excited because West Sacramento has always been the leader in affordable housing production. We have so many fantastic affordable housing units in our city, from Parkside to West Gateway Place 1 to Rivermark and West Capitol Courtyard. And right now we have 3 major projects underway. West Capitol Gateway 2, also our permanent supportive housing unit, which will house up to, I believe, 75 homeless who are transitioning into permanent housing. In addition, I'm a big advocate for Project Room Key and Project Home Key, which would convert local motels into housing, which would be transitional so that folks that want to get permanent housing can do so. We've never shied away from affordable housing in West Sacramento. In fact, we go there first, and we produce high-quality affordable housing for all people who want to raise their family in a safe and beautiful place.
Great. Appreciate that. We'll move back to candidate Scrimshire on the topic of affordable housing.
Thank you. In my mind, anyone who works a 40-hour week should be able to afford a roof over their head. That doesn't mean it has to be a mansion by any means, but they should be able to afford a roof over their head. So for your first question, that's where I put it. Now, this is one subject where I have to applaud the current council and Mayor Cabaldon in the work that they've done to create affordable housing in this city. I think that we're on the right track, and I think that we need to continue that. I would, going out of the pandemic, as we see this potential shortage, would not put off the table incentives to help bring developments in, but frankly, I think we should continue on the course that's already been laid out. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate that. Moving over to you, candidate Early.
So I might be one of the few candidates up here that, as an adult, lived in low-income housing. I was a teen mom, and so if it wasn't for that affordable housing and low-income housing given to me, I wouldn't have been able to go through my program and get my PhD, because sometimes you just need a little bit of help to pull your way out of poverty. For me, when I think about what affordable housing means, what low-income housing means, I think about my experiences with my family and being so appreciative to have a nice place to live that I could afford to not only work 2 jobs, go to school, and also take care of my family. And so that's what affordable housing means to me, that I can actually afford to live there and still pay my bills, put food on the table. Again, I know what it's like to have to stretch a dollar. When I think about the housing that we have here and the affordable housing that we have here in West Sacramento, what I think is so amazing about the opportunities that we've had here is that within the region, we are leading in building affordable housing. And as Councilmember Orozco said, we lead with affordable housing. When we are developing, that's what we start with, so that we don't have to deal with not in my backyard. We have nice affordable housing. We also have the Mercy Housing Project, in which we leverage federal funds and state funds for mental health as well.
Thank you very much for watching that time. Appreciate that. We will move on to you, candidate Akala.
Thank you so much. Well, I guess everyone has a different definition of affordable housing, and my concern is people in the north, where I see 2 or 3 families living in one house. Why? Because they make minimum wage. They work very hard. Some of them work, they're both parents working, and they work minimum wage. They will never, ever be able to afford a house. And this is really sad, because most of the affordable housing I see is in excess of $300,000 here. And if you qualify for something like that, you have to have excellent credit, a good $10,000 down payment, and both people working at professional jobs. So that is, to me, is not affordable housing. Affordable housing should be for everyone here in West Sacramento. I think the most important thing that we should be looking at is, as a city council, perhaps making it possible through maybe a down payment. When you have working families, we get housing where the city could help with a good down payment for some of these families and help them also maybe achieve the American dream. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. We'll close out with candidate Wilson on the topic of affordable housing.
Thank you. So I think first, housing is a human right. And we need to have a living wage set in our community that allows all of us to contribute and to benefit from the labor that is contributed. So as a business owner, I look to pay my staff more than is normal. I look to give them benefits and security because I want them to be engaged and live here and be happy and raise happy families. So while not everybody wants to own a house, I think we should have programs in place to help them accomplish that goal if that's something that they want. We should also have programs in place that allow renters to have more space to hang out if they don't want to have a home. I didn't want to have a home for a very long time. I was perfectly happy to pay someone else to let that be their problem. But business ownership, housing ownership are huge sources of generational wealth generation. And we need to let more people have the ability to have the American dream like everybody else did, and whatever that dream looks like for them. But I think that we need to work to house every single person in our city.
Appreciate that. Candidate Kala brought up that there were some variances between your answers, so we have a viewer question here in the audience that I think will help us. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to help us clarify the difference in your perspective between affordable housing and public housing. So if we could take away those that could afford, maybe with just some additional support, and those, of course, that can't support for other reasons. So we will start, we'll go in the same order, and we'll start with you, candidate Green.
Thank you. I wanted to just acknowledge that we do have actually a program for down payment assistance and had one for many years. Last year, just dedicated $200,000 to help ownership in West Sacramento, and I authored that through Measure N and supported it as a council member. We're doing both. We're doing publicly supported housing with our permanent supportive housing project, as well as affordable housing through other development, and I'm looking forward to working on both in the future.
Great. Thank you for keeping us on time here. Again, 30 seconds over to you on that clarification between affordable housing and public housing.
Thank you. Again, I mentioned that if you work full-time, I believe you should be able to afford affordable housing. We should have programs in place to help you own your own home. Not everybody's going to do that. Not everybody's going to be at that level. And that's where the public housing comes into effect. And we need to have those programs as well to help people have a roof over their head.
Great. Appreciate that clarification. And we will move on to you, candidate Early.
So in regards to public housing, I think we talked about that. In regards to affordable housing, I think that in order to make housing affordable, you need to increase supply. The more supply you have in your area, the more affordable it is for people to be able to buy homes. I know in my neighborhood, there was just a home sold for over $700,000. I can tell you, I can't afford that. But the reason why is because we don't have a lot of supply, and so we need to increase that in order to make affordable housing.
Appreciate that thoughtful response. We will move on to you, candidate.
Thank you so much. Yes, we talked about what affordable housing is, and $300,000 homes are still out of the reach for many families. As for public housing, I think it's a great idea that we have a transition for families that are working, get into public housing, and then be able to be assisted. I'm glad to hear that the city has these down payments. I think the most important thing is to make outreach to our West Sacramento community aware of these programs that are out there. This would be a great place for the chamber to help. Thank you.
Appreciate that. You know our willingness to support.
Thank you.
We will move on and close this out on this quick 30-second question over to you, candidate Wilson.
Thank you. So I feel that public housing should be provided to anyone regardless of their ability to pay. And it should be a home that they are safe in, that makes them feel comfortable and allows them to transition to work and to affordable housing. And then if they want to go buy a McMansion somewhere, then that's awesome as well. And we should support all of those things with more programs for renters, more programs for people who are experiencing homelessness and insecurities.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Well, that's a perfect segue into our conversation about homelessness. We have surveyed our membership, so I want to focus specifically on the business challenges around homeless issues. And we've heard directly that this can be a challenge, especially to those that are our storefront businesses. That includes bathing in restrooms, excessive loitering, vandalism, theft. It can be a bit challenge, especially for a small business. As a council member, how will you address this growing problem in West Sacramento and support those businesses directly? We'll start with you, candidate Scrimshire.
Thank you. I have had the experience of being that manager whose job it was to make the homeless person move along. I've lamented over this in years. It's a challenge. It's near to my heart now more than it ever was. And I think that the only solution is for us to work with our faith-based community and our community at large. The city council can't fix this problem, but the city of West Sacramento can. So we need to work with the organizations that are already putting their heart and soul into helping our homeless people, and we need to help them lift up our neighbor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm going to give our technical team just a moment here. Bear with us. We'll move to you, candidate Early.
So I think what makes for businesses dealing with individuals who are homeless so difficult is the question of who do you call. Oftentimes, businesses need to call or feel like they need to call our police because they feel, again, that they have no other resort. I think as a city, what we can do, and as city leaders, and again, we've already begun to do this, is ensure within our police department that we have mental health responders who can appropriately respond to and de-escalate those who are having mental health crisis, and individuals who are homeless so many times intersect with having a mental health need. Having a mental health need is not a crime and shouldn't be treated like it's a crime. And so how do we as a city have compassionate responses to those who are struggling? I think there are both state funds as well as federal funds that we can work with our county, and leveraging those funds and ensuring that we have mental health responders so that small businesses as well as large businesses can respond to those who are homeless.
Thank you. Question regarding homelessness and specifically our storefront businesses to candidate Akala.
All right, thank you so much. My brother's actually a crisis intervention specialist. Many times he is called out to help with some of the individuals who are usually people suffering from mental illness. Many of these people have addictions and all. So I think that's a very good tool that we have available to us, being able to call upon our mental health department. I think one of the most important things that we could do here in West Sacramento, we often have referrals to Holy Cross, for example, or the YOLO Food Bank. Many of these people sometimes just simply need a good meal. I'm not saying that's the only thing that they need, but that is usually a first step in helping many of these individuals. If we had public restrooms like they do in San Francisco and public showers, that would definitely be helpful because many of these folks that are out there, they're quite honestly looking for a place just to get clean. And many of them actually have, okay, see my stop. Okay,
No,
thank you.
that stop.
Okay.
Appreciate you respecting the time. Thank you so much. We'll move on to candidate Wilson.
Thank you. As a resident of San Francisco, I completely agree that the public toilets and facilities should be more available in the Sacramento area. So in terms of business, it's a very difficult problem, right? You don't want to lose revenue, but you don't want to be mean to your fellow human, right? So it's a huge problem. So instead of calling the police, I think mental health outreach, drug counseling, getting people into public housing where they can get the treatment and security that they need to then hopefully grow and come back into our society, or what we call it anyway. Sweeping people down the street is not the right answer, as far as I'm concerned.
Great, appreciate that. We will move on, lastly, to close out our homeless question, to candidate Orozco.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of the responses from some of my fellow interviewees. We have a wonderful mental health coordinator, Mark Sawyer, who has done a fantastic job over the last several years in helping us tackle local issues. But one program that I wanted to draw your attention to, one that businesses love, is the Downtown Streets Team. It's a program that I advocated for several years, and I was working on it before I came on the council. Essentially, homeless individuals that are related to our city can apply to participate in community beautification programs in exchange for gift cards to grocery outlet or Rayleigh's or wherever they can get their necessities met. And in the process, they wear these yellow shirts, they pick up sharp needles, and they get other services. So as of today, and I spent time with my Downtown Streets team today, 18 people have been housed and employed. And I'm really proud of the organization because they are visible, they're giving back, and they're making a difference. And so I really do support that program.
Wonderful, thank you. We're halfway through, guys. You're doing a great job. Take a breath. We're gonna move into the lightning round, and then we'll close out with some of those additional questions. As you may have saw last night, the lightning round is a set of questions that feature propositions that will appear on the November ballot, as well as a few other important topics relevant to West Sacramento. For each topic, I will state a brief description, and then I will ask you to indicate your answers by a show of hands only, if you support or oppose the particular subject. If you do not raise your hand for either time, myself as well as your online audience, we can assume that you've not made your mind up about this. So please no comments, just a show of hands. Let's begin. Proposition 15 is also known as the Schools and Community First Initiative. This is an initiative that adjusts the commercial property tax system in California to create what we call a split roll. This is where taxes are assessed annually on a property value versus only at the time of purchase. Will you please raise your hand and hold them up for us if you support Prop 15? Thank you. Keep holding for me. You good? Okay, you can put your hands down. Will you please raise your hands if you oppose Prop 15? We're great. All right, moving on to the next proposition. Proposition 20. This is a public safety initiative. It redefines many felonies as misdemeanors, including theft, and also modifies additional crime definitions. Please raise your hand if you support Prop 20. Sure.
Yes,
It redefines many felonies as misdemeanors.
I think it's.
No, it's actually an upgrade.
I'm sorry.
Hold tight. Let me clarify here. Hang
Please
tight.
do.
Yeah, I could see
Did
that.
you want to say something?
No, I said please do.
Okay.
Yes, you got it.
I don't.
I mean,
Let me ask my timekeeper or my support here. Will you pull that up and while I go into the next question, and will you provide me an updated description? Bear with me. Okay, we will get that clarified.
Thank
I'm going to
you.
move to Prop 24 for time purposes to keep us online. Prop 24 expands California's Consumer Privacy Act by restricting the use of data and creates a new statewide agency. Will you please raise your hand if you support Prop 24? Keep your hands raised. Great, you can take your hands down. Please raise your hands if you oppose Prop 24. Okay, so that would mean candidate Wilson is undecided, just for the record. Okay, let's move into the next one. That's a local initiative, Measure Z. The Washington Unified School Board authorized a bond measure for up to $150 million in general obligation bonds for school facility improvements, construction, and modernization. Please raise your hand if you support Measure Z. Great. Can you please put your hands down? For the next group, please raise your hand if you oppose Measure Z. Great, thank you. And finally, before we go back to Prop 20, we'll cover the streetcar project. The streetcar project, as proposed, will extend from West Sacramento Civic Center to the Sacramento Midtown Entertainment District. This modern fixed rail car line, streetcar line, will offer a transportation options to connect our two cities. Please raise your hand if you support the streetcar project. Great. You can put your hands down. Please raise your hands if you oppose the streetcar project. Great, thank you. All right, we are going to move back to Prop 20 with my updated description here. I'm going to read some of the ballot text, if that's helpful. That way then we can clarify. Starting at the top, it restricts parolee for non-violent offenders, authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated only as misdemeanors. You were correct. I apologize. I'm sorry. Limits access to parole programs established for nonviolent offenders who have completed their full term of their primary offense by eliminating eligibility for certain offenses. It changes standards and requirements governing parole decisions under this program. Authorizes felony charges for specific theft crimes currently chargeable only as misdemeanors, including most theft crimes that are valued between $250 and $950. For our online viewing audience, that is why the business community cares about this initiative. So, with that, let's go over it again. Please raise your hand if you support Prop 20. Thank you. Please raise your hand if you oppose Prop 20. All right, and so for the record, candidate Wilson is undecided. Thank you for that clarification. Apologize for that. All right, moving on to our last batch of questions. Question number 6. We will start with candidate Early. Racial equity ensures that a person's race does not determine their opportunity or outcomes for success. And we know the national conversation that is centering this issue. I want to focus, though, specifically what can we do to better our community. So as a local leader, how will you shape our community's economic development and other growth agendas to ensure equity for all?
So this is also a topic that's near and dear to my heart. While working at the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, I led our equity action plan and objective, which was a year-long looking not only at racial equity, but gender equity and everything that we do in order to dismantle institutional and structural racism. So that was looking at how do we contract, how do we do procurement, how do we recruit, how do we promote. All of those things need to be looked at through an equity lens. It starts by normalizing the conversation around race. It also starts by having a real measurement of what equity looks like and being able to, again, talk about that and measure what that looks like for our community. When you ask me what would we do as city leaders, I think it would be so important as we are looking at who gets funds and who we are doing grants with, you are looking through an equity lens and really seeing, again, what is the background, what is the demographic, and also ensuring that we are breaking down barriers for communities that often have not had a seat at the table.
Great, thank you. And I know that was a lot to throw into a minute, but just to keep us on track, I so appreciate your efforts there. We'll move to you, candidate Akala.
Thank you so much. Yes, institutional racism is alive, and I think one of the ways we can attack it is by our hiring practices. Those are so important. When I was on the school board, we had 7 schools, and we had many Latino children in our schools, and yet we had no role models for them. There were no principals or vice principals that were Latino. That was one of the things that I believed was so important, so that our children would have role models. Now more than half our schools have people that mirror our student body. We have many Latino principals and vice principals. And I believe that this is something that is very important to do because, as we mentioned about institutional racism, it affects all aspects, housing, employment, and also how people often feel about themselves. So I think one of the most important things we can do is, in our hiring practice, make sure that when we hire, that we have role models out there and people who mirror the demographics in the city of West Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. We will move to you, candidate Wilson.
Thank you. I think it's an incredibly important topic. Especially in the technology field where people end up being middle-aged white guys who grew up well, such as myself. There are plenty of women and people of color who do not bother to apply for these jobs. And when they do, the hiring managers have a bias to remove them and look for only people like themselves. And so in the last few years in technology, we've trying to move together to eliminate, bias in our hiring practices. And I think that we can learn something from what San Francisco is doing in other cities and apply that to our city as well, so that we have an equitable distribution of the taxpayer funds to provide services and things to our city.
Great. We will move next to candidate Orozco.
Thank you. I'm proud that I sit among one of the most diverse city councils in the entire region. And if Dante Early West is elected, it would probably be the most diverse in the entire nation. I am excited to be the chair of the Yolo County Children's Alliance, where I work with our community instead of talking about what we could do with our community. In addition, I created West Sac Kids Give Back, and Downtown Streets team promoted that through our city council. And I advocated as a President Clinton's leader on the Hispanic Education Action Plan to make sure that educational opportunities for disadvantaged youth were a priority. In our city, I believe that if we expand broadband to make sure that we get it to every place in our city, we will find a lot more equity there in bridging the achievement gap. In addition, mentoring kids. I've been a principal for a day every single year since I've been elected, and I work directly in our community, shoulder to shoulder, rolling up our sleeves with the people who need the help most.
Great. Thank you. We'll finish off this question with candidate Scrimshire related to racial equity and the city's policies.
Thank you. Equity of any type is unacceptable. We need to actively seek it out and stamp it out. The question is, how? That answer isn't very simple. The only way we can start is by making sure that we check our own biases and that we have open lines of communication with all members of our community. We need to actively go out and talk to members of every part of West Sac and see how policies are impacting them and how they feel about what we're doing through their lens. Communication is the only way to heal. I don't have all the answers when it comes to this one because it's such a difficult question. But we start by talking.
Appreciate all of your thoughtful answers. Moving into business improvement districts, and we will start with candidate Akala for this one. You will have 1.5 minutes. It's a two-part question, so follow with me. A business improvement district is defined as an area where a business is required, I should say, because it got into the conversation last night, right, that we voluntarily pay, it's of a vote, to pay an additional tax to fund projects that will either clean streets, provide additional security, make capital improvements, and marketing. Do you support the development of a business improvement district, just on its surface? And if your answer is yes, we'd like to hear, in your opinion, what area do you think is most appropriate for the first business improvement district here in West Sacramento specifically?
Thank you so much. Yes, I do support that. I believe as I said, I think it's really important to open our books. We may have funding already available within our coffers. I just believe it's a matter of priorities that the city council will have to set. I live on the north side, and I've seen the cracked sidewalks out there. It's really an area that could really use a lot of attention. I can tell you it's Sacramento Avenue before you get to the Home Depot. That is an area that has many small businesses. But if you look at the area, there's been very little attention paid there. And yet there's a big hub of our northern population there that does frequent the businesses that are there. So I would like to pay some attention to some of the areas that have not had a lot of focus from the city of West Sacramento, and I think that would be so tremendous, especially for that part of town. Thank you.
Great. Appreciate that. Again, the two-part question around business improvement districts to candidate Wilson.
Hi. So I think in general, I think it's probably a pretty good plan. I think the devil is in the details and how you organize a contract between all of the different businesses in that area and then measure success about what their contribution means back to their own businesses. And so generally I would support that, but I think we would just have to look at what the agreement was going to have to be in that particular area. That's what I would want to do, is if somebody came to me with this plan as a business owner, I would like to say, why do you want to do this and how can we make sure it happens and succeeds. So I think Bright and Broderick would be awesome places for that to happen, and West Cap as well, so we could have like a nice little downtown area. People could walk around. We could have new businesses setting up where we're building and not displace any of the old tenants and businesses there, but bring some new ones to the game. So that's my answer.
Appreciate that. We'll move to candidate Orozco on business improvement districts.
Thank you. I am excited about this question as well because it's something that I've been working on with our city manager. We've been making local presentations to Rotary clubs and trying to reach out to business owners. At first, I was interested because it would be a wonderful support for the Downtown Streets program since they're so interconnected. But also to promote safety and work with our local agencies, including the district attorney's office, to deal with our community prosecution unit and try to get in front of crime before it happens. And if I were to choose a place, it would be West Capitol Avenue, because I don't think the north is necessarily the rivers. That is not the place that I would focus on. I would focus on a place that needed attention. And when it comes to what we're investing on West Capitol Avenue, right now we've invested $17 million for a 3-mile stretch of road rehabilitation. If you take a drive on West Capitol Avenue, you'll see the work happening. The city is definitely focused on rehabilitating that area, and with Project Home Key and Project Room Key, I think we're well on our way.
Great. Appreciate that. Shifting over to candidate Scrimshire.
Thank you. While I support the concept, I don't at this time. I would love to see West Capitol be part of that in the future. I feel like coming out of this particular pandemic, we need to be very careful about what we ask our businesses to participate in. And I think that for now, we need to shelve that and bring it back in a time when we're in an uptick of the economy, not at the beginning of what's going to be a precipice.
Okay,
Thank
great. So it's a timing issue for you.
you. Yes.
Great. Thank you. We'll move to candidate Early.
So I think a business improvement district is a good thing if businesses want to come together and pool their money and resources to ensure that they are investing in, again, their streets and the safety of their businesses, and ensuring that those who come and customers who come from a safety perspective, but also from a cleaning streets perspective. And so in my mind, if businesses want to invest and come to the table together and say, yes, we want to do this, then of course, as city leaders, we are here to support you in that. It's also a good thing when we think about investment in our community. In my mind, it's a win-win. Businesses coming together, ensuring that there's a safer area, cleaner area, but also when I think about equity, this is again an equity issue in which, again, businesses are coming together and cleaning up areas that maybe don't get the attention and love that they need. When you ask about areas, I think West Capitol Avenue would be a great place to start.
Great. Perfect. Let's shift to transportation. The city has been very innovative in transportation solutions that connects all regions of West Sacramento, especially with less infrastructure than most cities. One example of this is the on-demand rideshare option, which is Via. As city council member, what would you recommend for future investment or new innovative ideas as it relates to transportation? I think many residents and businesses would tell you there's, separate of COVID, some transportation challenges, and how might you address those? And for this question, we're going to start with candidate Wilson.
Hi, so I think VIA is an awesome service, and we need more neighborhood mobility services to be running in our city. I think that our buses seem somewhat neglected, at least out in my neighborhood. No one ever rides them. It's very, very, very few people. And the convoluted way in which it gets to where it needs to go, I don't think fits the needs of people today, where you can just grab a car or get into a bus or another micro-mobility solution. So I think we should invest in more of those kinds of services, less in fixed rail things for the moment, at least, although huge fan of streetcars. I only took them in San Francisco. I went out of my way to drive the streetcar. I love them, but I don't like this one that much. So more investment in micromobility.
Micromobility. You've got it. Wonderful. And we'll move to candidate Orozco.
Thank you. I have worked on and voted for VIA, scooters, bikes, safe expansion of our trail system so we can make our city more bikeable and walkable. We've also discovered other mobility options, such as a shuttle that would operate during special events, as well as bridges. As many of you know, we are working on the I Street Bridge conversion, as well as a C Street Bridge, and we have also considered other bridges, such as the Enterprise Bridge and potentially the Broadway Bridge. It's a big deal. Mobility and transportation relates to climate, and for me, that's a big deal, because I'm not legislating for myself. I'm legislating for my children and future generations, and that's why I support the streetcar, because I want to make sure there are effective ways to be transported all throughout the region that are clean, user-friendly, and affordable for people who can't afford vehicles or don't want to use a vehicle. This isn't about me. This is about the future of our city.
Great. 1 minute on transportation, over to candidate Scrimshire.
Thank you. This is an area where we've really gotten it right. We're on the forefront of our neighboring cities in this area. I love VIA. I love that we brought in the jump bikes. I love that we have continually pushed for better transportation. I would like to see more development of our trails and our bike paths. I think that's the next step that we can improve as a city, to really connect the three basic sections of West Sacramento to get Southport connected more with the rest of our city. And I think we can do that through additional trails, and there's going to have to be a pedestrian bridge involved there too. But it's beautiful stuff that I'd like to see us continue in the path that we've been, because we really have been at the forefront in this area, in my mind.
Great. On transportation, over to candidate Early.
For me, this brings up a couple of issues when I think about our entire community. I worked on the Aging Commission for 7 years, and so much of the issues that we dealt with in trying to ensure that this was a community that we could all enjoy was transportation issues. When you are getting older and you can no longer drive, and that's not an option. And so how do you have affordable modes of transportation that can also take you to the local Walmart, right? Or take you again to your friend's house in order to ensure that you are not socially isolated. I think that the investments that we've made as a city in e-bikes and e-scooters, as well as VIA, should continue to be invested in. I know that VIA is still in its pilot phase, and so in thinking about sustainability of the program, I think we're also going to have to think about, again, how we're going to fund that. In regards to streetcar, this is also why I'm such a big supporter of it, because for me, I commute as a downtown worker and pay up to $175 a month for parking to commute 15 minutes. So when I think about streetcar, I think about it offering affordable options. What could you do with $175 a month?
Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll move on to you and finish this out with candidate
Thank you
Paula.
so much. I, too, think that West Sacramento has done some incredible things with transportation. The younger generation loves those jump bikes that they have, and I know older individuals, older than me, who frequently use the VIA. It's a very good transportation model. I know some of our students in Washington Unified use that as well to get to their schools. I do believe, however, that the streetcar would not be a good idea, because that streetcar would only go up to the River Cats Stadium. So I believe that money that we have allocated for that, the $38 million, could be used in perhaps getting more jump bikes and continuing the wonderful innovative ideas that we have already discovered work so well here in West Sacramento. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those of you that used your time to talk about the streetcar. That was great. I appreciate that for our online audience. All right, we'll move on to a new topic. Your role as a city council member, we'll be starting with you, candidate Orozco. Again, we'll give a minute for this, and I know this is another complex question, is to propose, of course, modify and approve the city's budget. Given the discussion around law enforcement and civil unrest at the national level, do you believe the city's investment in police is appropriate at its current levels? And if not, what would you do to change it?
I am the wife of a man who has worked for 24 years for the Sacramento Police Department, and as a deputy district attorney, law enforcement is alive and well. I absolutely support our officers. In fact, I supported the recent supports to our law enforcement officers with an investment in community service officers, as well as crisis intervention specialists, as well as a lieutenant to oversee and an additional homeless coordinator. Our officers are asked to do a lot of things that they are out of the regular job that they should be doing. And with these supports, officers don't necessarily have to be tied up on a call at a hospital for hours on end and be off of the streets. With those supports, it could be the difference between a mental health or crisis intervention specialist dealing with the problem rather than it escalating. So I do support our officers, and I do support additional supports to help them do their job.
Perfect. Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll move to candidate Scrimshire.
Thank you. I work for Rayleigh's, and I spent many years at the West Capitol store in management. I was a night manager for a long time. The reason I was so safe and felt so safe in that store was because I had dispatch on speed dial, but the police force that was there were so great, so responsive, so helpful for us. And they are essential to our community. We have to have them. So I know that in this state of unrest, there's been calls to defund the police. That's not the answer. I applaud our city and our police staff for looking for other solutions, including the social workers that they've got that they're dispatching out to domestic disturbances. I actually don't even think that's the right answer, but we're trying something, and I appreciate that we are. We have to keep the police funded. Thank you.
Thank you. Question around the police budget, over to candidate Early.
So I'll start by just answering the question. So yes, I think that our public safety is appropriately funded right now. So I think that's the start there, yes. I worked with our city, with Mayor Cabalden, on President Obama's My Brother's Keeper to rethink what community policing looks like. When we talk about social unrest, what we're talking about is you have swaths of our community, of your families, of your neighbors, me included as an African-American woman who has an African-American adult son and an African-American husband, in which when they go out, sometimes I don't feel safe. And so what does it look like to do community policing in which we all feel safe? When we think about the work that we did as a community here, on, again, President Obama's My Brother's Keeper initiative, we reallocated positions to, again, be able to respond to mental health crisis and, again, mental health issues, freeing up sworn police officers in order to respond to actual crimes, because having a mental health need is not a crime and shouldn't be treated as such.
Wonderful. And eloquent in 1 minute. Thank you. We'll move on to candidate Akala.
Thank you so much. I do strongly support our police, and I believe we have to, once again, have our community regain trust in our police officers. Measure N was passed, and that was in large part because people believe that our officers should be paid well. That was one of the reasons that I believe Measure N, sorry about that, Measure N passed, because people do have that belief that our police officers are there to protect us and do the due diligence for safety, in our communities. I believe, however, that certain reforms are necessary. I believe that we certainly should hire more officers that live in our area. I believe that we should have a citizens oversight committee. And I also believe that we should compile data on complaints and any cases where there may have been incidents of excessive force used. I think all these things compiled together make our community feel much safer. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we will finish with you, candidate Wilson.
Thank you. I strongly support our current efforts from the city and our police department. I think that we should offload the onerous tasks that are non-police related to those people who are best able to do them. And so mental health crisis counselors, drug counselors, all of those should become part of whatever this new police force is. And I think that's an awesome idea. I think we should probably pay them a little bit better because we seem to lose people on a regular basis. And that creates pension liability for us, but it also creates instability in our communities where people who were there are then gone. I don't necessarily believe removing the resource officers from school are a great idea, especially when those officers are really helping the schools get together and work on problems with the students and know everyone individually. And so more community involvement with our officers is great.
Thank you. Appreciate that. This is our final question for this evening, and then we'll finish off with our closing statements, and we will start with you, candidate Scrimshire. Equity has been an important conversation, I would say, both last night with the candidates as well as tonight. So we're going to close on an additional equity issue that's come up around ensuring equity and access for residents specific with disabilities. Right. So what would you do as a city council member to help that community specifically as we think about equity? We'll start with you.
Thank you. That's all part of helping our neighbor. It's all part of what we're here for, is to be a voice for the people that need us the most. So yes, absolutely, we need to do anything we can to help anyone with a disability so that they have equal access to everything. That could be help with internet, it could be transportation. It has so many different facets, but it's something that we have to focus on as a community, and we have to make sure that we're continually looking for the opportunity to lift up our neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to candidate Early.
So again, this brings me back to a lot of the work that I did with the Aging Commission and ensuring that our community is accessible for every walk of life, including those who are able-bodied or have a disability. When I think about what that means, I think about ensuring that, again, our community is following ADA standards so that, again, we all have access to the same resources and to the same stores. I also think about our transportation options and assuring that when we think about those transportation options, that they, again, are following ADA and that they are accessible in regards to mobility as well. I also think it's about investing to ensure that not only with our businesses, but with our streets, that as a city, we are investing to ensure that everyone has, again, access to our entire community and not just segments of it.
Appreciate that. Candidate Akala on specific around equity for disabilities. For those
Thank you. Actually, quite a few members of my family have disabilities, so I'm very sensitive about how important it is to provide accessible avenues for them to be able to live full and fulfilling lives. One of the most important things that I've seen is there are certain buildings still here in our city that could certainly use more accessibility for people in wheelchairs. That is something that is really important because some of the older buildings aren't necessarily required to have modifications made because of the age of the building. So I would definitely be in strong support of anything that would help our community, our members in the community who do have disabilities, and I think that the City Council could take a very strong position and affect some incredible changes by focusing on those members of the community that are often marginalized. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Moving on to candidate Wilson.
I don't know if there's anything that I could add that these nice people have already said so eloquently. So I would just add that I agree with everything they say, and that I think that, you know, in order for everyone's voice to be heard, the city and the council should be open to listening to the feedback from the community, businesses and individuals, and then actively solving problems, especially in this regard. We can't have a city for all without including everyone in it and their voices.
You did have something extra to
Oh, excellent.
Well done. Well done. All right. Moving lastly for this last question here to candidate Orozco.
Thank you. I was proud to be a champion for the renovation of Memorial Park, where we placed millions of dollars toward rehabilitating Memorial Park to be ADA compliant. Our next project is going to be Bright Park. We're going to spend millions of dollars to make sure that it's ADA compliant as well. Many people don't know this, but I was born with a hearing impairment, and I had several operations in order to restore my hearing. So I'm sensitive, and I think we have done a great job, but there's so much more we can do. We have finite resources, and we're a small city. But one thing I know for sure is that when there's a job that needs to be done, we in West Sacramento collaborate together to make it happen. So whether it's West Sac Play coming together with the city to make cupboards for our playgrounds, or maybe it's the Little League that comes together and helps raise money for shaping the curves, or maybe it's we, the council, deciding that every via has to have a wheelchair lift. We can get the job done, and we can get it done together.
Great. Thank you. You guys did an incredible job. That's completed all of our questions for this evening. I was trying to keep a list of all the things that we also could have talked about. So I know that we're limited on time, and as you think about rounding out with your closing statements, you know, maybe cover some of those things that we didn't cover that were important to you and your platform. Again, you'll have a minute and a half for closing statements. We'll work backwards, starting with candidate Orozco.
I chose home, and it's a place where I'm raising my 4 children. It's the only home they ever knew. In the past 4 years, I've worked hard to make an impact on my city. I've rolled up my sleeves, and I've stood shoulder to shoulder with the people that I consider my community. If you want to know what impact I have tried to make, you could ask Philip Babineau, or Robert Nagel, or TJ, or Skeets, who used to live at the river and now live a life of with homes and sobriety and employment because they were members of the Downtown Streets team. You could ask how the children in West Capitol motels feel when they got their scientific calculator as a result of our community-wide school drive that I put on every year. You could ask families who are enjoying a warm meal tonight because I helped hand out food at the YOLO Food Bank food distribution like I do every weekend. And as the chair of the YOLO County Children's Alliance, finding ways to make sure that every family in our community has their needs met. You could ask Robin Ruland, who's sitting in her wheelchair tonight, and he'll tell you that she, for the first time, was able to enjoy ice cream from the grocery store because she used to take the bus, and it would take so long, the ice cream would melt by the time she hit the front door. But because of VIA, a program that I worked on, she is now happily enjoying her ice cream. I'm excited for the opportunity to continue serving this community. I love West Sacramento. I'm committed to West Sacramento. And if elected, I will do the best job in my ability. Thank you so much for your consideration, West Sacramento.
Appreciate your comments, candidate Karina Orozco. I will move on to candidate Wilson for your closing comments.
So thank you very much for hosting this. I think it's really important to have public discourse about the way our cities are run and how we live in them. They are living and sort of breathing objects along with us, you know, and they need to adjust as time goes on and be agile, as we say in software, where we don't look at a certain path until it dead ends. We make sure to make changes along the way and ask people their opinions and alter the plan as you go along to make sure that you get something good at the end that serves the needs of the user, which in this case are all the taxpayers and the people who live here. So I think beyond jobs, infrastructure, which we touched on a little bit in education, I think one of the things that we could do to bring equity and new business to our city is to create a new municipal utility for broadband for all. As we are fixing our roads, we should lay pipe and cable as we are currently doing, and we should be able to provide high-speed internet service to every resident and every business in the city so that we can start to grow and create new jobs, bring new businesses here, and new opportunities out of that infrastructure, and invest in our future. So I know Measure Z is controversial, but it's a really great time to acquire debt. I mean, it's very cheap. It's a good time to invest. It's a good time to build.
Appreciate your comments. We will move on to candidate Alcala.
Thank you so much. I think one of the most important things that we can do as a city council is to be very proactive in getting the free internet I've spoken about. There is $864 million available, not just to rural communities, but to communities that are underserved. We certainly have those here on our north side. I believe that if we apply for grants under the Reconnect program and advance forward, we will be able to have not a luxury, but a true necessity in this global economy that we now have. That's the only way we're going to be able to compete and provide jobs for many people here in West Sacramento, as well as provide some excellent educational tools for the children in our community. I believe collaboration is so important. We need to collaborate with our citizens and find out what their needs are and what direction they want West Sacramento to go in. I think it's really important to get their input. I believe we should have labor at the table. These are conversations that have not gone on and that are very important because labor is very important to making our city a much better and much more proactive haven for working families. I also believe that SMUD, we can do it. And if we have the city council leading that, that charge, I believe that we can have a publicly owned utility. Because right now, we are all paying $1,000 more a year than they are in Sacramento. And I believe we can make this possible. Thank you.
Great, wonderful. And for her closing comments, candidate Early.
So one of the reasons why my family and I chose to move to West Sacramento is because we love the small town feel, the family feel, the family-owned and run small businesses, the community-focused schools. West Sacramento is rooted in family. We heard a lot of things tonight from all of us around issues that are facing our city. And I think at the heart of this election is which candidates do we think are going to be able to help us navigate a global pandemic and ensure that we are coming out of this pandemic together, strong, again, with our small businesses as well as our community altogether. I, again, am a public health researcher, but also what I bring, in addition to my mental health and public health, is a racial equity lens. The reason why I support Measure Z is because I'm rooted in all parts of our community here in West Sacramento. My daughter goes to school in Elkhorn, and every day I drive from the south side of town and take her to the north side of town, and that is my community as well. That is my community who has adopted me. Those are my daughter's peers, and it is so important that we are supporting all sides of our community. When I think about what it means to have this vote and what's on for the election, it's also about our values around who's represented at the table. If elected, I will be the first African-American person to ever be on city council. It's so important that we have representation when we're thinking about equity and all of our needs being met.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And we will close out with you, candidate Scrimshire, for your last 1.5 minute close.
Thank you very much. I'd like to talk about something briefly. I know that during the lightning round, it probably seemed like I was against a lot of things. And the reason for that's simple. I'm not a fan of spending money we don't have. I think about the Streetcar project, and I can't help but think of the fact that we have a fire station that's not fully manned. To me, that feels like you're buying a Porsche and you can't afford the utilities. So that's the reason that I'm against some of this spending. When it comes to the city council, I think, what would I like in my representation? Well, who would I want on the council? I want somebody who has an opinion, backs it with reason, is open to the fact that they could be wrong, and when they find that out, has the courage to change stance. I want somebody who will prayerfully consider every motion before the council, and I want somebody who really loves this city. That's what West Sacramento will have when I'm elected councilman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. This was a really exciting conversation. Your level of professionalism, your thoughtful answers, and the way that you all worked very hard to distinguish yourselves, I think, is important. And for our viewers at home, you have a very difficult choice. Just as a reminder, you will be selecting 2 at-large candidates from the 5 candidates that you've heard from tonight. So thank you for being here. I very much appreciate it. I do have a few closing statements, so please just stick with us a few more minutes. I do want to share the announcement for the West Sacramento Chamber's Voter Guide. This is a new initiative that we've started as we think about advocating for business in our community. And we heard directly from our members that they wanted us to take positions on statewide and local initiatives that impact the business community. While there are 12 initiatives on the ballot, we focused our attention on 3 key issues that impact business. These initiatives received comprehensive review from our Economic and Government Affairs and unanimous positions from our Chamber Board of Directors. I want to thank each and every one of them for their efforts with this. So with that, I'm pleased to share the Chamber's position on 3 key issues. With this, we hope to educate our membership, their employees, political leaders, and the overall community. So the West Sacramento Chamber of Commerce opposes Prop 15, raising property taxes. We support Prop 20 as it relates to expanding public safety and providing some relief on theft issues, and opposes Prop 24 that expands the Consumer Privacy Act. Be on the lookout for an email tomorrow and social media with more information around those 3 key initiatives. This brings us to the close of our candidates forum. I want to thank again each of you for being here tonight. I also want to thank the Center for Spiritual Awareness, specifically Reverend Georgia Prescott, for allowing us to use this space. It has been absolutely incredible. The gentleman that's behind me, I want to give a big, huge thanks to Eric Bianchi of Bianchi Sound. This would not have been possible without him, so I want to make sure that he knows how much we appreciate him. This recording will be available online at the West Sac Chamber website, also on YouTube starting tomorrow. So for those that may have missed something important or wanted to go back, or you'd like to see those from Area 2, Area 3 of Washington Unified School District, or the mayoral race, please tune in. I want to thank you again for being a part of this. If you are not registered to vote, go and do it. Your deadline is October 19th. The website is registertovote.ca.gov. This forum was presented by the West Sac Chamber of Commerce. I am so proud to have been involved and the moderator this evening. On behalf of the Chamber, I wish everyone a good night. Thanks for tuning in.